Okay, so they've built the giant pyramids of Giza, these gigantic structures. And then they've achieved these wonderful monuments, burial places to their kings, and then they stopped. And these monuments will stand in the desert on the Giza Plateau for thousands of years. Something happened there. We're not sure exactly what happened, but once they built these giant monuments, they stopped. There was a period of unrest, civil war of some sort, maybe a famine. We're not really sure what happened, but it's the end of the Old Kingdom. They've built these giant monuments and for some reason or other just stopped. The next period is called the Middle Kingdom. When they come back and we see that they've regained their government, we have what's called the Middle Kingdom from around 2000 BC, lasting till about 1652 or 1650. It's a pretty precise date when this is going to come crashing down. We'll get to that in a second, the end of the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is characterized by its capital being moved. The new capital is at a place called Thebes. This is upriver to the south, 500 miles south of the old capital at Memphis or near Cairo. So they've moved upriver. So this is, the whole world has changed from the civilization at the delta, now moving further upstream. And they've reestablished a line of pharaohs. They've reestablished a continuous line, so we can say the government has been reestablished firmly. We call this the Middle Kingdom. The pharaoh himself has changed. The old pharaoh was a god on earth demanding these giant pyramids in his honor, and the people did that. These new pharaohs, you see a different symbolism. They're now pictured as a good shepherd, a leader of their flock. Instead of demanding human physical labor, they're now more responsible, more available to their people. They more generous, more human, I think. The pyramids, they will have pyramids, but they're much smaller. So in other words, they continue with the idea of a monument for the pharaoh, but not quite to the same, not requiring every single resource of the state. And you see an emphasis on public welfare now. Pharaoh, it's not all about him anymore. It's more about the people now, and so you'll actually see them working on public things that help the population. Another thing in this Middle Kingdom, if you want to help remember, the Middle Kingdom has more of an emphasis on a middle class. We see a middle class somewhere between typical farmer and the elite part of society. There's a middle class growing in there. These are traders and merchants, people who are making money by taking goods from one place to then selling them at a higher place than another. They make their living from moving goods from point A to point B. Traders and merchants. We also see international trade now. You'll start to see objects in these burial places that we discover later on. You'll see objects that aren't from Egypt. In other words, somebody is leaving and somebody's coming back. Some things are coming from outside now. New items being brought in. And with new items and interaction with foreigners, new ideas are coming in. So we start to see a little bit of change. Archaeologists can notice the Old Kingdom monuments versus the Middle Kingdom monuments. There's a difference. Something has changed. New ideas, new forms are coming in. In other words, they've been exposed to visitors. Somebody is leaving and coming back, or other people are coming to visit visitors. And this can be good and it can be bad. Egypt in the Old Kingdom was stuck in its own little world, and now they're starting to interact with the outside world. And unfortunately, this is going to bring a dark surprise to the Egyptians, that they will be awakened that they've been living in a lost world and a little paradise unto themselves. And it's going to come crashing down. But before we get to that, before we get to the end of the Middle Kingdom and all kinds of trouble, let's talk about Egyptian religion, because we need to understand something about the religion here. We've been talking about pyramids, and that's what this is about. That's part of their religion. Their religion belief is that the universe is orderly. Everything seems to happen in a given order. This is different than Mesopotamia, where everything's happening in chaos and you don't know about the flooding of the river. You don't know what pestilence might happen. Egypt, a little more orderly, not completely orderly. There are some chaos and some disease, but generally things are pretty smooth. And so they don't fear their gods. Their belief of their gods is that the gods bring order, and they actually help humans. They are responsive to humans. We call this optimism, the belief that a better world is out there, and that this world is actually good, and then there's an afterlife. There's a reason that you're doing this in this world, because there's another unseen world. You'll pass from this world into an unseen world. They believe in thousands of goddesses, gods and goddesses, both types, and all kinds of strange animal gods and goddesses. So we call this polytheistic, similar to Mesopotamia. And they have a number one god. His name is Ra, or Re. He is the sun god. He is pictured as a sun above everything. And he is the giver of life. He himself is birthed every morning and he dies every night. He has a 12-hour cycle. He rises in the east and dies in the west. And meanwhile, when he's among us, when we can see him, he is the giver of life. He's also the giver of pain. If too much time in the sun can hurt you. He has children. Osiris, one of his sons. This is the god of agriculture. You can see him. He'll have a flail for beating wheat into grain. He'll have a shepherd's crook for animals, the gods of agriculture and farming. He's a good god. And then, as we're going to see here in a second, he will also become the judge of the dead. The reason for this is he has a brother named Set, or Seth. Set is the god of the desert. He is the god of the west. He is the god of death. Ra dies every day in the west. Things go to the west, the Sahara Desert. You're going to die. This is the land of Set. And according to the legends, these two get in a fight over something or other. And I think you can guess who kills who. Set kills his brother Osiris. Into this comes the sister. They have a sister named Isis. She finds her dead brother Osiris, puts him back together, takes him to the river, and she is the goddess of fertility, so she can bring things back to life with the river. She uses the river water to bring her brother back to life. She's the goddess of fertility, the goddess of mothers, the goddess of bringing life. So she and Osiris are close. In fact, they're very close. When she brings him back to life, she actually has sex with him. An incestuous god relationship here. And they give birth to a son named Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis. And it's he, Horus, who can project into this world. It is Horus who either is the Pharaoh or is the father of the pharaohs, depending on what book you read, what legend you read. Either he is the Pharaoh in our world, or he gives birth to pharaohs into our world. And so you can actually see gods. You can see Ra in the sun, and then you can see this god, the Pharaoh, on earth. But he will die. The Pharaoh will die, and we need him to come back. And so when he dies, we need him to be ready for the judgment in the afterlife. In fact, everybody will be judged in the afterlife, but especially that Pharaoh, because the new Pharaoh, we need him. We need him to emerge, to bring order into this potentially chaotic situation. So the new Pharaoh, the focus is on that, the arrival of a new Pharaoh. Here's a family portrait there. There's Horus on the left and Isis on the right, and that's their son, the Pharaoh there being born. So you have the story here of Osiris, Set, his brother, and then Isis, the giver of life, the rebirth, and they give birth to Horus, who you can actually see in our world. One thing that you see here is the themes. There's death. Everything dies, but you can be resurrected, with the river playing a role, with Isis playing a role, with Osiris playing a role. The Nile River is the source of all the life and also re-life. Just like the sun, even the most powerful god Ra dies every day and is born every morning. It's a cycle of life. They believe that life is cyclical, that you are born and then you die and then you pass into an unseen world. And the same thing happens there. You go through that process and then back into our world. So it's a cycle of life and then an afterlife. And for them, order needs to be maintained. Occasionally there's an aberration. The river doesn't rise correctly, or there's storms or locusts. And this is because somehow the cycle's gotten messed up. And so if everything can be maintained, it brings order and it brings happiness. This is where the mummification comes in. When the Pharaoh dies, his body must be mummified. The exterior anyway. They will remove the organs out of it, including the brain, and just make it into a casing, but then they'll preserve it as best they can. Because the belief is when you pass into the afterlife, you need to be recognized in the afterlife. They have a fetish for it. Everything, in fact, in this world that we see of them is focused on the afterlife. Getting ready for it, that this is just a temporary world, that the afterlife is much better. So they have a fetish for it. You would grow up spending your entire life thinking about your burial place. In fact, that's why the pharaohs for 20 or 30 years will have their burial place made for them. And everyone will. Poor people even will prepare for their death and their afterlife, hopefully. So the burial is important not just for the Pharaoh, but for everyone. You must prepare to meet your judge, and the judge is Osiris. He has been in this world. He has died. He's been reborn. So he knows how to do it, and he is the judge in the afterlife. And you can see him. He's blue. He'll be the blue-colored individual that you will go in front of as the judge of the dead. So your physical body, when you die, your physical body needs to be preserved as best you can so that you can go through this process and gain entry into the afterworld. You will meet your Ka. In the afterlife, there is a you, an unseen you, your Ka. And so it needs to recognize you. It's to carry you through this process. The Ka, the unseen soul, that the two things must meet. Your physical body and your unseen soul need to meet so that they can carry through this process. Everything is done to assist you. Your life here is preparing for this passage into an afterlife. And we see it in the Book of the Dead. It's not a real book as such, but inside of tombs, all around the walls of these tombs, even wrappings of mummies, there's this instructions of what to do into the afterlife. You will pass through a series of gods. The gods will come out to meet you. This will be inside of a pharaoh's tomb, where the drawings are really nice and there's etchings and they're carved into the wall. But even on a poor person's mummified wrappings, you'll see these kind of instructions, what to say to each of these gods that you meet. And for a pharaoh, this is actually how we would know a lot about them, is that there are instructions on the wall inside their tomb for when they come back to life. Their instructions would be, tell this god such and such, tell this god such and such, aspects of your life. And then finally, you would come in front of the final judge, the judge of the dead, Osiris. Here he is in blue again. And so this is the final judgment. And again, above the pharaoh, you can see, or whoever this individual is, you can see what they've done in their life. And this is what you tell Osiris, your good deeds that you've done in this life. And there is a judgment. You can see here the balance beam. Your heart is placed on one side of the balance, and then the feather of Mot is placed on the other side to judge your behavior, to judge your evenness and your justice, to be judged before Osiris using the feather of Mot. And then if things go wrong, you have this crocodile creature there that will devour your heart and mess up the process. So they revere the dead, that the dead are just moved into an unseen world, and they will hopefully come back into this world, that this whole process, what you actually see and then what you don't see, is a continuous process. So you can go to these shrines, the massive burial shrines. It's not just 3 temples at Giza. There would have been a huge complex of shrines and for sacrifices and things. And so finally we come to the end of the Middle Kingdom. All this system is going to come to a shocking change here. The end of the Middle Kingdom in the year 1652 or 1650, somewhere there. They are invaded by Hyksos. This is the Egyptian word for these people that come in. These people come rampaging in. These Semitic people, we know how they spoke. Again, the Egyptians with a Hamitic language. These people come in with a Semitic language. They came in from the Fertile Crescent. There's actually no documentation of them in the Fertile Crescent. They were such a small group. But when they come into Egypt, they're unstoppable. Again, the Fertile Crescent, a place of war, a place of all these innovations. Egypt stuck in a time warp. So when they come across the Sinai, these Hyksos coming in from the Fertile Crescent across the Sinai, again, because of the Egyptians in the Middle Kingdom are doing some trading now, probably across the Sinai. So these people have heard of Egypt and know how to get there. So these Hyksos come in around 1650, and you can tell by the picture here that this is a whole new world for Egypt. We've never seen this before. A chariot. Again, Mesopotamia has been advancing in the last couple thousand years. They've gone from wheels to spoked wheels, from 2 axles to just 1 axle. A chariot now pulled by a team of horses. And they have superior weapons. The Egyptians had bows, small little bows for hunting. These are warrior bows. These bows can penetrate armor, especially anything the Egyptians had. The Egyptians don't have good armor and good metal. So you see this Bronze Age technology and new metals in town. The Fertile Crescent has bronze, a mixture of copper and tin. Not just copper, but copper and tin make much stronger metal. And so you could come out with your small bow and just get killed by a composite bow with a bronze tip on it, or a bronze sword versus your copper sword. So this is a meeting of 2 worlds. Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, meets Egypt now in the year 1650, and the results are disastrous for Egypt. These outsiders have better warriors. They know how to fight. They're used to fighting. Egypt, not. They don't fight. Better weapons with bronze and the bows. and then better tools. Once they actually take over these things that they've made, they've used better tools to make them. But it doesn't last that long. The Hyksos rule over Egypt was traumatic. There are descriptions of how cruel the Hyksos were. The Egyptians had never seen anything like that before. But it only took them about 80, 90 years under Hyksos rule to finally rise up. There'll be a revolution against the Hyksos in 1567. They drive out the Hyksos or enslave them, and this will be the start of a whole new world for Egypt. You go from being attacked and defeated to suddenly rising up, gaining your freedom, and it's a whole new world, this new kingdom from 1567 for about 500 years. For the next 500 years, it is a whole new Egypt. Everything has changed for them. This is the Egypt that expels the Hyksos or enslave them, and a whole new mentality for Egypt. Everything has changed. This is going to be a warrior Egypt. If you look at the picture here, you'll start seeing Egyptian chariots now, Egyptian horses, Egyptians with bows, Egyptian armies. They've understood the foreign technology. It took them 80, 90 years, but now they understand the technology and are using it. And you will see in the new kingdom